Has this ever happened to you? You've been sharpening your chisels with a cheap honing guide, only to end up with chisels with a less than square blade? It's very frustrating, which is why I came up with a new sharpening system which will hopefully prevent this kind of thing. Keep watching and see how it works. Hey everyone, it's Tony from the Handlebar Workshops, and today we're in the garage workshop. And this is my new sharpening system. It's kind of based on the Lansky sharpening system where the blade stays still and you move the stone over the blade. But rather than just doing knives, this is designed to work with chisels and plane irons, and maybe scissors as well. You can see this is just basically a piece of plywood with another piece of plywood and a piece of hardwood on top of that. These are just bar stock of aluminum, so they won't damage the blade, any of the blades that you put up here. The reason we're using hardwood on the top is because when you put the screws in the side, the plywood tends to separate and then it makes this less than flat. We need this flat. And then back here we have the riser bar, which can go all the way from 10 degrees up to 30. And anywhere in between. This is 25, which is where I like my chisels to be at. Now to hold the chisel on, I've made this. This is basically just an 1/8 inch piece of angle steel that I used, and I cut it off with my Sawzall. And then I've got the holes here, and I've got T-nuts on the other side, so these can screw right in to a hole to hold, depending on how close you need to get up to the blade or back. For knife blades where you're getting a real low angle here, I use some screws with fender washers, and I've got some Gorilla Tape on the bottom, and that'll just screw in here and hold the knife down like that. And then for those of you that want to put a micro bevel, just slip a piece of pipe over the bar here, and now that raises you up about 1 degree or so. And this is how I hold the diamond stones here. These two pieces of aluminum here on the outsides just keep the two pieces from racking, so you just have to screw down here. The hard part is getting a threaded rod all the way through to the top. I've got a wing nut up here and a wing nut at the bottom, and I've got magnets in to hold the diamond stone in place. So I'm not relying solely on the two end pieces here. You can kind of see the profile I've got where I took a 3/4 inch piece of plywood and glued on a 1/2 inch piece on it as well. And you just tighten up these wing nuts and it tightens on the stone to hold it in place along with the magnets. Because we're going to be turning this upside down and you want to make sure that your stones don't fall out. This is just a piece of all thread coming out of the stone holder, and then I put on a piece of white plastic tubing that I found at the hardware store. And that just lays right on the crossbar and it slides right up and down real nice. So you can keep it nice and square with where the blade is registered at here, and then you just move it over the blade like so. So let's see how this would work. You have a chisel. This one's a Work Zone chisel that Paul Sellers likes from Aldi, straight out of the box. Do the paper test here. It's not really doing much. I can get the cut. It's fairly sharp. Just got a scrap piece of maple here. You can see I can get some shavings off of there, but they're not really pretty. So let's see if we can do better than that. Now since this chisel is straight out of the box, we have to flatten the back. Let me take care of that off camera. I just have coarse, fine, and extra fine diamond stones. So I didn't flatten the entire back of the chisel, but you can definitely see I've got right along the edge of right along the edge there. So that'll be good enough for today's demonstration. That only took me about 5 minutes to do. We place the chisel in here. We use the tabs to make it square. Put the holder on. This is just an 1/8 inch aluminum with some plastic tubing to protect the chisel or the blade or whatever you're sharpening. And it also holds it in tight. So now I just select which hole I want to put my bolts in. Up against the 2 tabs on the sides and the 1 tab up front here. I'm going to pull in this direction here, this way. You can use a nut driver or a socket set to get these in tight. You don't have to be too tight though. The angled bit here, it prevents it from bowing too much and it holds it in real nice and tight. So now we put these little tabs down. So that way we're not hitting those with the stone. You can see we've got it in there and that's not moving at all. We'll put the coarse diamond stone into the holder and tighten up the bottom wing nut. Make sure the top one doesn't spin on us too. Right? Doesn't need to be too tight. Do a little bit of simple green on there. There you go. Just moist. Everything's finished with 2 coats of shellac, regular shellac with the wax, so it should keep it fairly clean and not let any of this dirty water and stuff get into the wood. All you do is set it on the blade and then you just move it back and forth. It's starting to sharpen. This angle is not exactly the same as this angle, so the first time you sharpen this out of the box, you're going to have to set your bevel. So this is going to take a little while. You can see here that I set the bevel. Now it's filed all the way up to the top, side to side, top to bottom. Now I can move on to the fine. This is a Stanley number 5. I've sharpened this iron before, so I know I don't have to worry about the back so much. So I will just work on setting the bevel and refining and honing it to a nice, very sharp edge. So this is the iron out of that Stanley plane. I may need to touch up the back a little bit. I've kind of neglected it because it's such a pain in the butt to sharpen with that cheap honing guide, and I never really got as good as results as I had hoped I'd get. So let's see how this works for now. Yeah, it definitely needs some work. I don't know how I got this plane to work before. This iron is a Stanley iron. We turn it around, we look at the back. You can see right along the edge here. This shinier stuff in the middle is where I've been working it on the coarse stone now. I went back to the coarse stone. So mainly my edges are a little shallow, and it also looks less than square. Yeah, definitely not square. You can see through the left side there. So we'll get that taken care of with this over here. So after working on the back of this plane blade for a few hours over a couple days, I think it's good enough. We'll see. But right now, it's not shaving any hair. You know, it's definitely not scary sharp, so we'll see what I can do. Remember that this blade has a longer end, it's not square, it kind of comes out like this. So I'm just registering the far corner over here with the tab in order to get it square. With the sides, I've got 2 points of contact on the side and one all the way over here. And it's in there nice and tight. About 10 minutes of working on this blade so far, and you can see that over on this side here there's a much wider strip of light color than there is over here. I've just kissed the edge over here. This white line here is what was there before. This darker line at the top here is what I've just created, is the bevel I've just created. So about 10 minutes of filing. I mean, literally I'm sitting down doing this, and I'm able to get this started to get squared up here. After an hour, I think we're pretty much there. It's not perfectly square here. You can still see a little bit over on this side over here where it's not quite touching. But it's much, much better than it was. Finally, the one piece that I've really been curious to see how this would work on. This is a knife. I have no idea where I got it, where it came from, but yeah, I can run my thumb along the blade. You can see how close I'm, and absolutely nothing on my thumb. And that's where these come in. They're just fender washers with screws in them, with Gorilla Tape on the back for some grippiness. Alright, this is where the 2 tabs up in front come in handy, because you can use those to register the blade of the knife. This knife has a curve here. I kind of want to try and miss this corner of the block as much as possible. You can see I've already drilled 2 pilot holes here, and that's for the screw and the washers. You don't want it right up against the back of the knife, because the screw, especially with these conical screws, they could push out on the knife and move it out of position. Now we drop the tabs, and that knife is in there pretty solid. I'm going to go with a 15-degree single side, 30-degree inclusive. You see why we moved to the screws and the washers, because now if I was using that corner bracket, I'd be hitting it with the bottom of the sharpening stone right now. Now you can see the edge on there. How it shines. See how it does with shaving here. It's hard to see with the rust on there, but it did get some. Well, it may not be sharp enough for some of you knife aficionados out there, but I don't know, that's good enough for me. That's pretty good. So this is the point where the YouTuber usually sits down and tells you how they have the plans on sale at their website. Well, I have neither plans nor a website, but I will show you how to make it yourself. I pretty much built the entire thing out of scrap wood I have here in the shop. The base is just plywood. This is 2 layers of plywood here. Here's a layer of plywood here. 2 pieces of plywood up at the top. Sizes really don't matter. It all kind of whatever you can find. That's easy for you to obtain. This is 1/8 inch angle iron steel. The hardest part is doing this, and then this is just a piece of plywood glued here, and I drilled some holes, and getting the hole all the way through is if you have a long drill bit, you can do it all in one shot. Otherwise you're going to have to drill from multiple sides here to get this. And of course adding in the magnets is just a matter of using a Forstner bit to get the holes out, and then using some 5-minute epoxy to hold them in there. And then they hold this in like that. And that's it for the most part. I've got some aluminum down here, which you can cut with woodworking tools. This you need a sawzall or some way to cut metal, because you can't cut steel with woodworking tools. And this part even comes off, because if you're like me and you spend most of your time using machines to mill your wood, you can store it flat. Now there's some washers down here, and I use that to get the proper angle, because I mismeasured, and I'll show you how to measure the angles now. So probably the most difficult and crucial thing you need to measure is the angle. And to do that I've used a Wixley angle gauge here. It has a magnet on the bottom, and it just attaches right to the diamond stone. And then just by pivoting on the front side of the block here, you can come up and find your angles. Over here between the uprights, you could just take a piece of dowel and stick it in there and clamp it together to come up with the exact angles you want. You mark them on the inside, and then you drill them out, and now you've got your holes that you can stick your dowel rod through. You can get a nice measurement on the Wixley digital gauge. 10, 15, 20, 25. You gotta be careful because it could slide out of that plastic there. You can see we're right there. It's not crucial that you get exactly 25.0 on the gauge here. You just kind of want to be close. What's more important is consistency, so that when you put your tool or your iron or your blade in this system here, that you're always grinding at the same angle. That'll always guarantee that you're not dulling the blade by going at a different angle than you were originally. So as long as you're close, that's good enough. But other than that, that's pretty much how you build the entire thing. That's all you need to know. So if you like these kind of videos, be sure to give me a like and hit subscribe, and that way you can see all the other videos I have coming up. It ought to be interesting. Until then, have a good one.